Creating more immersive, complex patterns is greatly simplified if you approach it systematically. And simple drawing methods will help you figure it out as well. In this movie, we'll leverage drawing to compose our surface design and build it using simple methods in Adobe Illustrator. But first, I want to show you a trick I use in Adobe Photoshop to help me create a seamless repeat. So this is my thumbnail sketch. The final size on this was actually a little over 2 inches wide by a little over an inch tall. You can see I drew it with a pretty blunt pencil. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what I'm keeping in mind is I'm working out, and I did many of these thumbnail sketches, just trying to figure out a flow to how these vines and branches interact with one another. Wherever it comes in at the top here, has to go out at the bottom. And so those are the things I'm kind of keeping in mind. At the top here, it comes in, goes off the side here. That means it's going to come in on the side here, go down here, go off the bottom, and then that's going to come in on the top, sweep all the way down and in here. So technically, that's one vine. And I'm going to show you that in Illustrator and show you how I build that, because that might seem a little confusing right now, but what's going to help you figure out the repeat is you can take a thumbnail, even a crude one like this, bring it into Illustrator, and all we're going to do is go to Filter, we're going to go to Other, and we're going to go to Offset. This takes the image and it offsets it. You want to make sure to have wraparound on. That means where it starts going off one side, comes in on the other side. And you can do this visually here. So if I just pull this over to right about there, that's kind of in the center, that's fine. And then I pull this one over, I don't know, let's do this going center-wise the other way. Something like that. I think that looks fine. We can click OK. So now I know the top and the bottom are exactly matching up, because Photoshop's done that. The only parts that aren't matching up were the parts that I guessed on anyway. And you can see I was off here, I was off here, I was definitely off here, way off on this one, and even more so on this one. So this is what I will save out as an image just like this, and then I'll draw on top of this and perfect my flow of those vine shapes. But this helps me and guides my drawing efforts. And once again, I'm trying to create a roadmap for vector building. So let's jump to Illustrator, and I'll show you from that point moving forward. Go to Illustrator, and so we're in Illustrator now, and this was, once again, my original thumbnail sketch. Here's the offset, and once I had the offset, this is where I start drawing on top of it. Now, this is the exact drawing I did on my light pad. Once again, I work in analog. I prefer working in analog, and I draw in vellum. And much like on my light table, this is kind of how I saw the sketch through it. And then I just cleaned up those areas that weren't transitioning from one area to the next area to make that nice seamless repeat. But this is my drawing. This is the process I use to do my final, what I call a refined sketch. I scan it in using a flatbed scanner, usually around 600 to 800 ppi. In this case, it's a bitmap TIFF image. Place it into Illustrator. By default, bitmaps, when placed into Illustrator, the white is transparent and the black is just default. Now, a nice thing about bitmaps, and I'm going to be showing this in an upcoming movie I'll share on YouTube, you can colorize them. So if you want to color it any color you can, that's kind of the cool part about a bitmap. But in this case, we don't need any color. We'll just use the default black. I'll set the transparency to 15%, and I'll go ahead and lock the layer. Now, the first thing I want to do is turn on a bounding box, because the bounding box is going to enable us to register elements as we build it. So if I turn on this layer here, you can see I started building this, and this is just a simple path. We're not trying to add volume at this point. We'll just beef up the stroke to create the final size we want. So in that respect, it's a pretty easy design to build. Now, if I select this path I created and select the bounding box, and I clone it, Command-C, Command-F, this is going to use that bounding box to register it. So I'll just slide it over, and I have Smart Guides turned on, Command-U, and I'll snap it over here so I can see how it's coming in on this side. So I can select this, go to my pen tool, and I can keep building here. I'll just point out like this. I know this one up here is going to come in right about there, so I know it's going to go down here. So I'm going to kind of guesstimate and put one here, kind of like that. And then I might go back here and finesse it a little bit. Once I have that, now all I have to do is select that path and bounding box again, hover over the anchor point on one corner, snap it to the top, and now it's in position to double check it. You can see I was off quite a bit. So this is where I might reposition it a bit. Then I'll keep finessing the path like that. And now I'll just keep building it to build out the rest as it goes out here. So I'll pull this out like that. Probably put a tangent right about here to create that. And then we'll go here, create one right about there. This is going to swing down and go off the side there. So I'm just going to put it right about there like that. And you can see we're just continuing the length, and see how this is wanting to snap. This is where Smart Guides can kind of get in your way if you're building kind of free flow building like this. And this is where I'll toggle them off. You'll toggle them on and off as you build. Command-U to toggle them on, Command-U to toggle them off. So now that I've toggled it off, I can do these finesse little moves without it trying to snap or anything. And I'll go here, adjust my Bezier curves to align it to my underlined drawing. You know, this is telling me I might have this one in the wrong position, so I'm going to move this over a bit. And I think that'll work better. I can adjust this to get the curve. I think that works better. And this all I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep finessing it until, for me, it's a feel thing. If it feels right and nothing looks out of place, then I know it's probably pretty close to the final position I want to keep it in. So I'll do this, and I'll just continue to do this and move it around. In this case, I might go ahead and clone this, take this path now, and I'm going to move it up here and double check how it comes in over here. As I do that, I'll just delete the other bounding box. And this is where this is coming in. So I think this is going to end up being probably right about there, like that. I think that's pretty good. And then, knowing it's going to come in on their side, I'll slide it over, snap it here, and you can see it's a little off there. So I'll just adjust it again, like that, and continue building like this. Probably come all the way to this point. Then I can go to the anchor point tool and just kind of pull out to get that path here. And this is how I would build a complete vine from where it starts here all the way to where it finishes here. I'd add in that line, but I'm not going to bother doing that. But I just wanted to explain that because that could seem somewhat confusing just stating that. And so this is best shown than explained. So let's go ahead and turn this off, and I'm going to turn on, this is the first vine, the one that I showed you building, or I'm sorry, this is the second, one of the first vines I built. This would be the second one. Now, when they're all together, this is what they all look like in place. And this gets kind of real crazy. But once I have it in place, I just start copying it, moving it into the precise location, using the bounding box as I was sliding it around. And then I just cut off and only use the part. Like I only need this part to create this little section. And then I cloned it, brought it over here to bring in and come into this part. So it's not like just one path. I create one path initially to make sure I have all the areas covered. Then I move it around and chop it up, because everything outside the bounding box in these areas outside the bounding box isn't even part of the pattern. It's only what's within the bounding box. You just have to pay attention where it goes off of one edge and it flows into the next edge smoothly. So this would be all the vines. Then I start working on the branches, and these are just the smaller components. Some of them have a leaf on them, some of them don't. That's fine. Then I work out all the leaves. These are the easiest of all things to create, and work those out. Then I have the flowers like this. So what I usually do at this point, when I have my art at this point, I tend to save everything. And I wasn't intended to show this, but I am going to show it. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go ahead and add another layer. We'll double click into it. I always color mine blue because I don't like having it yellow and stuff. If you're a cartographer, enjoy it, but not me. I want the same color. I'm going to name this the X layer. And in my build files for any project, I always keep an X layer. Why X? Well, it goes back to the 90s when I was using freehand. I would use layers there too. I would try different things, but then decide, nah, I'm not going to use that. But I didn't want to throw it away because it's not bad. It's just not going to work for that project that I was creating. So I'll save it. And that's what I'll do here. Once I get to this point, I'll just go ahead and Command-C, Command-F, clone everything, and then I'll go ahead and group it just so they stay together the way they should, and I'll move it to my X layer, and I'll just turn it off. This becomes like a vector junk drawer. And when I'm working on a branding project, there's all kinds of iterations I'll stick in there. And then at times, I might have another project come up that I go, oh, you know what? I did that one exploration. They didn't like it, but this would be perfect for that. And I'll go back and I'll start harvesting from that. And oops, looks like I moved the layer. Let's put it back. Harvesting from that some ideas that I can spin off of or completely redo, but it gives me a starting point. So call it creative renewable energy, if you will. So once again, all of this is based off of the bounding box as we're creating all these elements. This will dictate how we edit, because what we're going to end up making is a trim tile here, but we need to get the final artwork going. So what we're going to do is select all the vines here. All these vines, right now, they're just a 1 point, I believe. We want these to be twice as thick, so we're going to go to 2 points. And then the next thing we want to do, we want to make sure you have rounded corners on. That's going to look nice. And also a cap. The reason why I'm saying that, let's zoom in on here. This is what a round cap looks like. That's what you want. It's better than a flat cap. So not a big detail, but one that just looks better in my opinion. Go back to layers, go to branches, select everything on the branches layer, change that to 2 points. And these leaves, all these leaves are going to be fills and a stroke. Right now, this doesn't have a fill on it because it's not a closed path. It just has this path going here and ending here. But we'll deal with that once we expand everything. We'll go back here. We're going to click on the leaves, all the leaves. We're going to go ahead and beef that up. And we can even drop a fill into those leaves. So it gives you an idea. We already have a fill on all the little floral elements that are floating within the negative space. That's just to fill out the pattern, to balance it, and just to give it more interest and a little bit of texture, if you will. So once we have this, all it comes down now is expanding it. And so I would expand all of these paths to strokes. But let's zoom in on this one, because on this one, you can see I didn't round it. So you want to make sure you always round it. In this case, on this one, I think it looks better rounded. Even on all of these leaves here, I think those would be better rounded. That includes this shape, rounded, so on and so forth. But all we'll do is we'll just expand this, and it'll turn it into an actual shape. Then I can select the inner part of that shape, delete it, and we get the final piece of artwork we want. And once again, we're going to end up trimming this, and we're going to trim it based off of the bounding box we created. ultimately, you want to end up with a clean piece of art that's like this. So if I click this, this is nothing but black. It's just all fill, no stroke. And if we go to the appearance panel and we check it out, it's also a compound. That's important because if you go to trim it now and it wasn't a compound, you would probably lose some of these elements. They'll just disappear. And you might have noticed that before when you've used Pathfinder, and you might have wondered, well, why did it do that? I don't know. That's just the way Illustrator handles it. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Illustrator is a weird thing with compounds. Some functions retain compounds as you edit, such as the shape building tool, which is great. That's the way I think it should be. Other things like the Pathfinder, which is based off, the shape building tool is based off of Pathfinder Boolean methods, but it doesn't retain it. So I don't know, they're inconsistent in Illustrator. So all we're going to do, we're not going to use the outline here. We're just going to turn this one on, and this will just be the same size as the bounding box. We'll select our artwork, and we're just going to go to intersect Pathfinder. That takes two objects, in this case, our pattern art, and in this case, the same size rectangle as our bounding box, and it's wherever they overlap, it creates a new shape. It's called intersect. And actually, I think that name, they gave a good name for this Pathfinder, intersect. Minus front, not so much. So now that we have this, notice it's going to default to a group. And at this point, it doesn't matter if it's a group or it's a compound, because once you bring a compound into the pattern tool, it turns it into a group anyway. So what we're going to do here is all we're going to do is we're going to color this one, this nice teal color. And we'll go ahead and drag and drop into the swatches, deselect, because if you don't and you create a pattern, you come back, it'll fill this with that pattern, which I did many times when I first started using this feature eons ago. So now we're in the pattern tool. Notice the pattern repeat is in place. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to use the pattern tile tool to adjust anything. It's perfect because we trimmed it. That's one benefit of a trim. So that's why you might want to handle it this way. We're going to name it. So we're going to call this meandering spring, and we'll call this teal. I always like to name it so later I know what it goes with. If you're not sure with the other features, this feature, the overlap, if you had an object-based pattern, if you watch my other video on patterns on YouTube, I explain this a little bit. If you have shapes that overlap, this will dictate if it overlaps coming in on the left, overlaps coming in on the right, overlaps from the top or bottom, so on and so forth. And that's all that does. Copies just shows how many copies in the preview you see. If you had a smaller pattern, let's say it was a fourth this size, you would see the background would be white. But if you put in a different setting here, maybe 9 by 9, then it would fill the background like it does here. Dim is just dim. If you want to get a good idea what it's going to look like when you use, you can put in 100%. But I always usually keep mine dim just so I know where my artwork is as I'm using it. Now that we have everything set, that's all we need. We can hit escape to leave the pattern tool mode back to the desktop. All we're going to do now is we're going to select the same artwork here, and I want to create a white out of it. Now, we can take this same exact artwork and we can either rotate it now or rotate it once we've applied it. What I'm going to do is rotate it now because it just makes one less step. So I'll rotate it 180, drag and drop that, deselect, click into here. We're just going to name it. It's not showing because it's white on a white background, but it is here. So we're going to name this meandering spring white, and maybe we'll do 3 because I believe I have 2 other ones already in here like that. And we'll go ahead and escape back to the desktop, and now we can start utilizing this, and I can show you how it works. So let's click on this layer, And we're going to go ahead and select this layer. And let's go ahead and fill this. Instead of gray, we're going to fill it with this green. And we're going to go to the appearance panel. You can see the green fill. We're going to add another fill, and it'll take on the same characteristics of the one we just used. We're going to select our meandering spring. That looks pretty cool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the appearance panel. We're going to add another white, or another layer that is. It's going to add it above. And this one will keep the fill of the pattern we just added. But on this one, we're going to change it to white like that. I think that looks pretty cool. Let's go back to the teal one. Expand this, click on opacity, go to blend mode, and set it to blend mode multiply. That way, as it overlaps elements in the background, it creates this really nice color shift. And this just makes it far more immersive. I think that looks good. I don't like that white is so stark and 100% value, so I want to add some opacity to that just so it falls back a little bit. Not a lot. We're going to take away 15% to 85. And I think that looks really great. And this is our final pattern called Meandering Spring. Once we have this, of course, we can save it as a graphic style, which is nice. I can just drag this whole object with 3 custom fills on it, no stroke. Drag, drop it right on graphic styles. You can see it saves it there. That way, anytime I want to use it for another project, I can just select a shape and fill it with that graphic style. And if we look over here in the appearance, it's the exact same setup, exact same settings. It makes usability of patterns really, really easy to handle. Here's another one based off this pattern. My daughter Alyssa, she saw me working on this, and I asked her, hey, what colors would you like to see a pattern using this? And these were her colors. I would have never picked these, but I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool. And even though it's called Meandering Spring, color can make it useful for any season, really. Here's one where I colored it more cool colors, and this would work great for wrapping paper for Christmas or the winter holidays type season. A lot of different ways, a lot of different color shifts you can do. Here's another one I really like. And the name Meandering Spring, I want to thank Vienna K. Ray, who I had posted a sneak peek of this pattern on my social media, and I asked people who follow me to suggest a name for this pattern. She's the one that came up with Meandering Spring. I thought it was a brilliant name, so that's where it comes from. Thank you, Vienna K. Ray, for coming up with a cool name. I hope you found this useful. Creating repeat patterns like this is a lot of fun, and once you have the primary assets in place, saved as graphic styles, you can easily make color shift variations to make even more useful for a wide range of products such as branding or licensing opportunities. If you like this movie, please consider sharing a link to my YouTube channel on social media. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for watching People Love Process, and I hope this content helps you improve your own creative process.